here, and I'm excited to welcome you back to another episode of Actually, You Can. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Gerard to the show. Gerard is a financial strategist who over his career has worked for large corporates as a CFO, turning over $100 million and has sold businesses worth over 8 figures. It's no secret that owning a business isn't easy. When someone first starts a new business, it's not uncommon to operate in survival mode for the first few months or even years. And in Australia specifically, it's estimated that about 60% of businesses will fail in the first 3 years of operation. But you don't need to be part of this statistic because there is support available. If you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner who wants to level up to something big, then you're going to want to stick around. In this episode, Gerard goes through the exact methodology he uses to help businesses get out of their own way and become industry leaders. So get ready to learn how to craft a business that grants you the freedom and enables you to have the impact you've always envisioned, whatever that may mean for you, because actually, you can. Hi Gerard, welcome to the show. It's so exciting to have you here.
G'day, Viv. Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to today's topic. As a small business owner myself, I know I have a lot of value to learn from you. And before we dive in, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. Who is Gerard and what do you do?
I'm a financial strategist and I work for Gerard. Financial strategist is essentially someone that helps business owners when they've reached the limit of their understanding, right? And we do that through the structures, systems, processes, and people, right? Those 4 elements are what I think really underpin our business, which ties the strategy of a business, i.e. why it's in its existence, but also the operations and ultimately where a business wants to go. And where a business wants to go might be defined by the owner, right? Or a bigger purpose in creating outcome for the economy or people as a whole.
And you mentioned when we were chatting just before that it's a pretty impressive stat, but about 60% of small businesses tend to fail within the first 3 years of business. Why do you think that is?
Look, starting with the end in mind, a lot of people say that, right? Defining your purpose, I think, is a critical start for any kind of business. In terms of stats, that's not even the worst one, in my opinion. I think around 43% of small businesses don't make any money. And I think of those small businesses, 60 or nearly 70% take home less than what the owner would have gotten if they just worked a full-time job, which is really scary and disheartening in a lot of ways. But I think that can all be solved pretty simply by starting with the end in mind, creating a business plan to really understand your market and what solution you're trying to provide to it. But then it's not just about, being product focused and things like that. Okay, you have to get your pricing right, but also all the back end. Right? If you're good at what you do, right? Let's say you're a dentist or you're a personal trainer or whatever the case, a physiotherapist or something like that. Being a good dentist, physiotherapist, trainer, right, does not necessarily make you a good business owner. In fact, I would say that it actually probably makes the transition to being a business owner harder because you're already an expert, right, in a field, right? And being an expert in 2 fields, whilst possible, is definitely rare. So making that transition is a big threshold to get over, and the skill sets are not transferable at all, right? Diagnosing knee pain does not equate to reconciling your Xero, QuickBooks, or whatever, financial software you're inevitably going to have to use. So having an awareness for that, right, I think would probably, in terms of that statistic, halve the amount of failures, right, if people would just understood more of what they're up for or what they're in for.
Yeah, and you touched on a really great point here. I had a previous guest on the show who spoke about turning your passion into a business. And there are some things that are best left as a passion. That was my experience in the fitness industry. I love coaching and training, and I loved being a coach and training. What I didn't love was having to transition to being a business owner, because to be a successful business owner, that required a different skill set, and it took away from the enjoyment I was getting from being a coach and training myself. And so from your experience, how does someone who potentially is super passionate about what they do transition to being that business owner? Do they always transition? Or if they don't transition, what happens, or what would you suggest they look to do instead if they can't make that transition?
Look, if yes, that's a really hard one to answer because it's something, it is a learned skill, right? So I don't think there is anything necessarily inherent in a really successful business owner that ultimately, I mean, when I say that, I also think of a million examples where someone has a really great commercial mindset, right? Which is kind of a bit nebulous, right? You think of commercial mindset, what does that mean? And do they just recognize opportunities in the market, or are they good at recognizing both sides of a position, right? And generating win-win situations? Or are they a bit more like a hustler in the sense that they have this great work ethic and things like that? So I don't think we're born with anything that ultimately pushes us down a path, even if we are a great operator, which I'm going to label those people that are good at a specific skill set, right? I don't think there's anything there that ultimately means that you can't be a great business owner. I think it's about just having the appreciation that being a business owner or running a successful business is a completely different skill set. And maybe it does come down to passion. I mean, your point there, I echo that completely. And I'm not sure what your previous guest had said, but I really dislike the kind of narratives in the world at the moment, especially probably in the age groups of the early 20s, where it's, go out, work for yourself, be your own boss, right? And I get there are some lifestyle pushes that are encouraging people to do that. But what the data is telling me is you're going to have a really bad time. And you're going to get years of your life, you're going to lose years of your life that you'll never get back. So yeah, I don't want to, I guess, butt heads with the previous guest, but I don't encourage that at all. And your point about your coaching experience and what you got out of it, I echo that as well, in the sense that, I've had a gym for 8 years, and I've many, many times over those years thought about coaching. But I then look at all the other great coaches that are in existence, right? And think, well, I think I'm great at what I do. I'm pretty sure my clients think that I'm great at what I do, but if I was to do that in the fitness realm, I don't think I'd be as good as the existing coaches and trainers and professionals in that space already. So why thin the cohort by adding, a lower quality? I mean, even though I don't attack with as much passion and vigor as everything I do in my life, I still don't believe that I'd be as great a coach, which highlights this purpose element. So maybe, as you kind of alluded to there, if you're driven to be a good business owner, maybe that is the only indicator that you need, because like I said, everything else can be learned, right? If you're driven, passionate, motivated, those are actually the key ingredients, because you can learn the rest. Whereas if you're not passionate about it, I mean, and as I say that, I am definitely passionate about fitness and helping people and things like that. So you'd think there would be a natural nexus between me and being a coach. But if I don't believe that, then I should not be in that space.
Love it. And things are all right to be passions and hobbies. We don't need to make passions and hobbies businesses if that's going to take away from the enjoyment. Everyone just needs things that they enjoy for the sake of enjoyment. Like, I'm freaking terrible at drawing. And if I was to be like, I draw for fun, I want to try and make money out of it, I would fail miserably. Like, that deserves to stay in the confines of my own sketch journal that no one sees and it doesn't get the light of day. And I really love the comment that he said, because I'm very much in this world, the narrative of, especially in the early 20s, where it's like, yes, work for yourself, have the freedom. I think freedom's the value that comes with that messaging, and a lot of people in that early demographic are seeking that, when in reality, to your point, I think in the search of freedom, when you create your own business, you actually feel a bit trapped if you don't know what you're doing. And so I'd be interested to talk to what, I guess, is the reality of business, and how can you create a business that feels free and empowering versus one that you get trapped in? Is it, to your point, the skill sets you need to learn? Is it the support that you need to get? Or what does that look like?
I think first and foremost, you've got to ask yourself the question, why are you in business, or why are you looking to be in business? Because freedom looks different to every single person, right? There are incredibly successful individuals that are wedded to their job in a way that would spend hundreds of hours, right? Just in their business, perfecting the craft, perfecting the product, whatever the case may be. And they would consider themselves perfectly free, right? So time is not necessarily a great indicator of the emotion of feeling free. But I will say this, if you are in a business or going into a business or operating a business and your goal is to feel free, then understanding what creates freedom in your life has got to be the first step. So putting that aside, right, if freedom means that the business needs to be more profitable, right, because that's going to give you a greater financial return and that makes you feel free, right, doesn't necessarily change the time component of how much you're spending there, then that's what you need to know. If on the other hand, right, you want a proper business to allow a certain lifestyle and that's what makes you feel free, right, the business needs to be able to run without you being there, then that is very different. So start there. Once you know that, it is kind of binary from that point. It is the structures, systems, processes, and people from that point and setting all of those elements up, right, to create that outcome. So your structures, right, that's the business model itself, right? That's the inputs, outputs, resources, understanding what actually is the business in this separate entity, right? The second is your systems, right? And that's the interrelationship of all your business divisions, right? So it's how your finance, your sales and marketing, right? Your human capital, I should call them that, human resources, your people, all that kind of thing, right? Your processes, right? Which is how you create, standardized, repeatable work. It's your technology stack, right? It's how you, present your competitive advantage to the marketplace. And your people, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. They are the genuine point. They are the glue that holds together all of those elements, right? So once you've decided on why you're in business, right, and you have all of those elements worked out in your favor, then ultimately it's the execution piece and the rest is literally just the rock up and do it every single day, right, with that outcome in mind. But I think what people do is, even if they might know step one, and a lot of them don't, they certainly haven't done the business plan at the beginning, right? I love using this as an analogy and you see this as well. You walk into a gym, right? You can instantly pick out the people that either have a program or don't have a program, right? And then once you probably indoctrinated yourself into the environment a little bit more, right? Even the people with a program, the people with a program and a coach, right, or someone that's helping them externally, right, you can start to differentiate those people from just a program, right? So, and the outcomes of the program, the coaching manifest themselves over a longer period of time, right? And that's the same in business. You have a business plan. It does take time for the results to manifest themselves. So it's never overnight, but starting with a business plan and then taking it that next step further, right, into an actionable thing that ultimately creates the outcome. I think there's also, for those that might have a business plan, they've done it and they've given it the amount of time or respect that are required. But beyond that, there's no feedback mechanism. There's no checking back in with it. There's no external accountability or authority that's plus. Let me just add in there that the market changes. So, your business plan of 12 months ago might not necessarily be the right business plan in the next 12 months, right? If your industry, for whatever reason, relies on a lot of debt, right? Cost of capital has increased significantly over the last 12 months. So I'm sure that you probably need to look at your business plan to really understand, okay, as a whole, right, does the model still stack up? Or if we've got to change, right, our value proposition slightly, our competitive advantage, is that still valid? Do we need to do more to differentiate ourselves to create the returns that we're looking for when we initially set the strategy, right? And then that obviously has a flow and effect to the systems, right? Okay, do we need the sales and marketing division to do more here? Or do we need more support from finance to understand where our leakages are, right? Or is it to the people? Do we need to shrink or grow the workforce, right, to be able to deliver more or whatever the case may be, right? And then your processes, processes are things that should be changing pretty regularly, even though you want structure, right? In your processes, I realize I'm repeating the word structure there, but in a different sense, the structure creates rigidity, right? And you need rigidity in processes. If you have too much fluidity in processes, you might as well not have them at all. But if you have rigidity in your processes, you still need to be reviewing them every 6 to 12 months, right, to make sure that they're still valid, or maybe you have different people in different roles, or your technology stack's changed, for instance. Like, I mean, that's a huge one that creates a whole heap of procedural change. Things that you're doing manually, right, you can now completely automate, whatever the case may be. And then obviously people. I mean, that element of a business line constantly changes as come and go. Hopefully you've created an environment that's supportive and you've got a great culture and things like that. People want to stay and work for you. But I mean, as that changes, that can have a significant outcome on your ability to execute on your competitive advantage. If you've got key people, right, that you haven't put enough support around or defined processes or the way that they've done things, and you're really beholden to the value that they create in the organization. If they leave, then all of a sudden your business has materially changed. So having an awareness of all those things, right? And how and what the business is trying to create for you, whether it is that profit element so that you feel financially free, but not necessarily it's a time thing, or if it is a time thing, you can be, I don't want to say absent from your business, but you can run the business in a way that allows you a lot of time freedom. Then you've got to have all those elements, in my opinion.
I love a good process, and you provide something that's really simple to follow. And I say simple, but simple isn't always easy. And I get this in the coaching space. I mean, if it was easy, then you wouldn't have a job and I wouldn't have a job. And so for what reasons do you feel like people are challenged by implementing these steps? What do you see in your work?
It honestly, it comes down to that first bit about making that transition from operator to business owner. I'll often, and this, you probably get this more than I understand it, but people's identities are quite often wrapped up in what they do, in their skill set, what they went to university for, essentially, to be that physio, that dentist, or that coach, or whatever the case may be. And therefore making the transition away from being that thing to just being a business owner, and which is, as we've spoken about, is a completely different skill set. That requires a lot of, I guess, inner work, right? To be able to let go of that and focus on the new skills. I think also business is just too competitive and too complex in this day and age, right? I think we've spoken about previously that businesses 15 years ago didn't necessarily have or feel the need to have an internal marketing manager, right? Whereas this is that position, every business over turnover 50 million or 100 million would absolutely have a chief marketing officer and maybe an entire team. Even if they outsource a significant amount of that function, they'd still have an internal person that would be dedicated to liaising with the external. So with that complexity, with that competitiveness, I think there's just too many things, too many pressures on business owners to really give that methodology, the structure, system, process, people enough space to create it in a good way, or in a robust way, I should say, because people, the second they get into business, they're too concerned about making sales. They're too concerned about paying staff, right? And they're not thinking about the big picture at all. They're still half in that mindset of I'm a physio, I'm a dentist, I'm a coach, right? And they're, and I said half, but really it's probably they're still 80% in that headspace, right? And then they've got 20% on the business, and that 20% is just taking up basic functions. I mean, the amount of businesses I see that just don't have up to date financial information. You know what I mean? They leave it to the end of the quarter and then ship it off to the bookkeeper or whatever the case. Like, you can't make good decisions, right? With old financial information. If you're not making good decisions, then you've also got no clarity about your future, right? So if you don't have good financial information, forecasting for the future, it's all done up here, right? And it's done on one metric, right? And that is sales, right? Or cash in the bank, right? Business is significantly more sophisticated than just being able to watch one indicator and make a good one. Unless you, and I'm going to eat my own words here, unless you're in a geographic or in a market or a, industry or something like that is emerging or new, right? Or you have barriers to entry where, you are the only physio in 300 kilometers, right? Then sure, you can be as inefficient as you want, right? And people are only going to go to you because there's nowhere else to go. So, but for the rest of the business cohort, I think there's 2.5 million businesses in Australia, and of those businesses, I think over 2 million are small businesses. So that'd be going to be over 80% of businesses in Australia are small business, and they really are the backbone of the Australian economy. But if 40 something percent aren't making money, right, I would say it's because they're uncertain about the future. Their mindset is still in the delivery of the skills, rather than being a business owner, right? Poor decision makers, and their business is full of risk. The music stops tomorrow, they're losing the family home or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I've had the pleasure of working for big corporates and as well as my own business. And I find the transition to big corporate, I still very much have my own business mentality. So for example, I rock up to every day working like the business depends on me. And if I don't give it a level of effort, then I don't get paid and I can't put food on the table. And I think that's the reality for a lot of small businesses. It is their livelihood tied up into that. And it's just really interesting going to big corporate and seeing people's experiences who might not have come from that background and just seeing the different mindset. Like when you're literally working to sustain your life, like a paycheck not guaranteed, it's a very different mindset. And you mentioned before that the climate for business is getting more challenging. Do you
Mm.
think there is a right and a wrong time to start a business?
Wow. That's my initial reaction is that there is never a wrong time. There are wrong reasons is kind of the way that I want to answer that. There is never a wrong time. I mean, not to get, all data driven, and definitely look like a finance guy here, but, over, especially in Australia, right? The Australian economy is incredibly resilient, right? So bucks for a few blips on house prices are generally always going up. There's always generally a healthy sentiment in the marketplace and things like that. So there's never really a wrong time, right? And I mean, unless you wanted to get into something ridiculous, and then it's industry based, right? If you're trying to start I don't know, what's a terrible example, but I'm sure you could probably come up with something that just didn't make sense in our geographic environment. For instance, right? If you're trying to sell, how to build an igloo in Australia, you know what I mean? Like just be a bit smarter than that, right? But it's all about the reason, right? So if you're not 100% in, and I realize that I said before, it's, you have this apprenticeship phase when you first start a business, right? So you do a lot of learning, but if you're not 100% on your purpose for starting that business, right? And if you don't genuinely believe that there's place for that product, service, whatever solution you're providing to the market, and if you haven't done any kind of work around just vetting that, and I don't mean family and friends, I mean really seriously understand if the market wants what you're trying to sell it, then that would probably be my hard limiting factor for starting a business. Know those things.
Yeah. And I love that you've mentioned it can be a wrong reason. And something that I'm seeing a lot in the circles that I follow is if you want to make money by businesses, and a lot of businesses that are getting pitched as good ideas are ones that involve very few humans. And it doesn't have to necessarily be in an industry that you're passionate about. So some businesses that I've seen as good ones to buy are laundromats and portaloos. What's your thoughts on that sort of narrative where it's like, if you want to make money, buy a simple business and you can just make lots of money that way?
It's not that simple. First and foremost, it's never that simple, right? Unless you have someone's giving you a technology solution, like you say, that requires no people, and it's going to have 100% market acceptance and therefore market share in a very tight niche, and you've got years of runway before your next entrant, right? Then it's way too competitive, way too complex to be able to think. Look, I agree with if you want to make serious money, owning a business is the only way you're ever going to do that. I genuinely believe that. However, it's a lot of work to create that outcome, a lot of work. And I'm not one for luck, because I genuinely believe this structure systems process people, and not to keep harping on about that. But if you see lucky people that have done really well in their businesses, they might have timed it right well, or they might be in a geographic area that, did have barriers to entry or something like that, or they had, a product that ultimately wasn't replicable or, new, differentiating, whatever the case may be. They might have had it slightly easier, but they still had to do everything else right as well, right? There is not a product out there that just prints money that doesn't require, you'd have a CFO or even some stuff, you know what I mean? Right. And you can really stuff things up, right? I mean, one of my biggest issues with how profitable small businesses are and how, uh, I mean, I'm going to say flippant, right? How flippant business owners can be with the responsibility of running a business. And I only say this, I only use that word because the amount of businesses that I see where employees super is unpaid, for instance, right? You're literally stealing from people's retirement, right? That's a huge thing for me. I think, given that, and I don't want to be too harsh on business owners because I'm also saying it's incredibly challenging, but you need to approach business ownership with the right amount of respect, right? The right amount of effort, right? And to do all those things to create those outcomes, even for those that are, like I said, got it relatively easy or appear lucky. That's super critical to highlight that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I've been in situations where super hasn't been paid to me. And I've also been in situations where there's been weeks where to be able to pay staff, we haven't been able to pay ourselves. And so I can appreciate the challenges there, and it is the reality. And I think to your point, there is definitely a need to have a level of respect. If you're looking to go into a successful business, anyone can open a business. You can register an ABN online in like 5 minutes. And so I'm interested to hear from your point of view, what else do people need to know about owning a business?
Um, Look, I think it's not about necessarily what you need to do or things like that. In terms of what people need to know is that it is challenging, right? And to run a business well, I believe that you've got to do those things that I've already spoken about, but really you've got to create a mechanism to get clarity on the future, right? So once you get clarity on the future, you've got to know where you are at now, right? So, and this applies for existing business owners as well, right? So even if you've been in business for 10 years, this is still important for you to understand where you are at now, right? And that's the next most critical thing. So once you understand where you're going, where you're at right now, you can then start to get better at making decisions, right? So and that comes through understanding your business model. So really, what are you actually doing, right? So people, and you probably get this, as a gym owner, people aren't necessarily buying, time at a facility to use, right? They're buying outcomes, right? So just being clear on those kinds of things. I mean, I think, younger generations, understand that better than older generations. But if you've been in business for 10 to 15 years, the world's changed a lot in that time, right? So you might not necessarily be across why people are buying a product at this point in time. So understanding that, so give yourself clarity to understand where you're at now to make better decisions. The last element is understanding how risk influences your business, right? That has got to be huge. Because ultimately you can be as profitable as you want. I'm sure there'll be a point in the future where that is at risk, right? Or depending on where you're at in the business life cycle, right? Your risk profile changes and the challenges of what got you through or the opportunities that what got you through an earlier phase, might now be your biggest risks, for instance, right? So understanding how you can mitigate against the music stopping has got to be the next thing. If you can cover off on those elements, then you probably got something pretty robust.
And you mentioned the importance of having vision for your future and understanding your current reality. And I think to your point, there's people who may only start to look into their detailed financials come tax time, or they might not know metrics in their business. So they don't know if it's successful or not, or whatever definition they have of successful business. How often do you think business owners should be reviewing metrics, and are there any key metrics that business owners should be all over?
I think, well, maybe let me start here, right? I have to fundamentally question, if you don't know your numbers, I don't understand why you're in business, honestly, right? Because if you're focused on providing the outcome to the marketplace, right? So in the example of the physio, like if you love treating people for blown knees or something like that, right? You can be exceptional at, right? You can be like an entrepreneur inside someone else's organization, get paid incredibly well with no risk whatsoever, right? And provide those fantastic outcomes to those people. right? Why, why take the step into business ownership, right? If if you don't want to do the business stuff, right? I mean, if your bank account, for instance, isn't reconciled every day, right? And if you're not looking, I don't care how big or small your business is, like that is fundamental to me. If you're not looking at your financials weekly, right? Whether it be just revenue, whether it be your gross profit margin, whether it be your net profit margin, or even just your wage costs, right? So, I mean, it's industry specific. So if if you're a very, high product based business, right? Your stock turnover is pretty cool, right? You can look at the numbers pretty regularly, like weekly, and get a lot of information about that. If you're in hospitality, you're watching your wage costs every single week, if not every single day, right? If you're in building construction, project timelines obviously a lot longer. So watching, revenue, for instance, will have no value to you, especially if you're on the much longer time scale, like a property developer where it's 2 years to build a block of apartments, for instance. But you might be watching costs or specific things around that. Depends if you're a builder or just developer. But yeah, anyways, you might be watching your loan costs and things like that. But cash, people watch cash in some ways way too much, right? Because it's a really easy metric to look at, just cash in the bank, right? You don't have to worry about your financial information being up to scratch or correct or accurate because you can just check onto your net bank. But what people don't realize is that number is actually a huge melting pot of a lot of things, right? And cash in the bank is not necessarily a good thing or reflect good thing, right? You can have cash in the bank and still be losing money because you just haven't paid anyone. So, not to be really brutal about it, but you're giving you some false sense of security. Yes. Your balance sheet is if you're ratcheting up your balance sheet on the liability side, not on the asset side, but you've got a whole heap of cash that's sitting there, it's nothing. It means absolutely nothing. So, I guess to answer your question specifically, you've got to be watching it regularly, and regularly depends on your industry, but at a minimum, even the property guys will reconcile their bank accounts every single day because that's just good, right? And you know what? If your business has started to grow and you are struggling, because you've only got two sets of eyes, there's only one of you, right? You're struggling to watch the different areas of business as it grows, right? Ultimately, cash is still a good one to watch, but you've got to be watching it in conjunction with where your balance sheet is at, right? And the second you say to someone, what's your balance sheet, right? And they're a physio, they've never looked at balance sheet in their life, or if they're a dentist or a personal trainer, or even if they're a builder, right? They're not going to do that. So you've got to have, at that point, you've got to recognize, okay, my business is getting complex to the point where I need help in this area. And it's not a bookkeeper. I've got to say this, and this is nothing against bookkeepers because they're not there to make sure that your business is making money, right? And likewise, even your accountants, they chime in once a year. And even if you have a really, really good one, I know for a fact that they still have to prioritize a whole cohort of work in their practice every single year that is stopping them from checking your balance sheet when you need them to check it. So, I mean, it's finding the right person that can do those things or can help you do those things, because ultimately you've got to learn those skills. Otherwise, again, I'm going back to the point, just be a really good physio in someone else's practice, right? Letting them take on all the risk, right? And work. I mean, I saw this in a lot in the recruitment game where if you're really, really successful and likewise historically in the sales game, if you're really, really, really good at what you do, right? Working for someone and then having an incentive or a bonus scheme that are, your whole remuneration package as a whole. If you're working for a good person, or a good business, I should say, they will recognize that because there's a lot of opportunity cost if you leave or something like that. They will remunerate you correctly. If they don't, just go somewhere else. If you're genuinely as good as you think you are, and if the market's telling you that, then just go find the place where you want to work and really get those settings right. Because just jumping out and working for yourself, 60% of people or small businesses earn less than they would have if they just done the job for someone else. So
I wish I could bold underline what you just said. I think there's some people who make excellent employees, and anyone would kill to have them pay whatever they need to keep them happy. And that's great. It's almost like when you get people in various positions who are really good at their craft and then they get promoted to a managerial position and they suck because they just don't have that skill set and they just don't want to do it. They really enjoy being in the weeds. And I feel like people shouldn't be penalized for that. And I think if you're really good at your craft and you're really passionate, then there's nothing wrong with that. The next progression doesn't mean that you need to own your own business. The progression for you could look like getting more scope. It could look like pay rise. It could be working for another organization, or you could look to progress in other areas and just go, I'm actually really happy with the level I'm at in my job. I can look for growth in other areas of my life as well. So really love that advice. Bold, underline that one there. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the difference between the roles that you can have in a financial team. So a lot of small businesses I know go, yep, I have a bookkeeper and I chat to my bookkeeper. I would love to know, what lessons can the small businesses learn from big corporations? So who is in a financial team for a big corporation that you feel that small businesses probably need to start looking at those skill sets or bringing those sort of expertise on board?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, every big corporation will have a strategy, right? And the SME version of a strategy is their business plan, right? So you start there, right? And helping you develop. There are people that will help you write a business plan, right? I have people write business plans. I definitely like to put a financial spin on it because, again, right, you're in a business to make money or to create freedom, and ultimately the business has to make money to give you that freedom. So you've got to start seeing things through a financial lens. But the McKinseys and the Bains of the world, right? Large consulting houses, they'll meet with the Procter and Gamble's, and they'll reset their strategy every single year, right? And that'll cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. But there are people in the SME space that will do that for a fraction. I really mean a fraction of the cost, right? So once you've done that, much like big organizations, you've got your strategy set, right? And your strategy should have reviewed the external marketplace, but then also looked internally, right? Your competitive advantage, do things like SWOT analysis and whatnot, or your pestles and things like that. For those that have actually been, that have been to uni and done a few business courses, you probably come across those acronyms. They still use them, right? Like, this wasn't some crap management 101 course at whatever university. And yeah, I'm never going to use that in real life. That is genuinely what they use. So yeah, once you've got your strategy set, you should have a really, 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 really strong understanding of your business and its market. If you don't, redo your strategy, honestly, because that should answer every single question, honestly. So once you've got that, you've got your strategy set, right? Let's manifest that strategy or try and manifest that strategy based on a whole set of assumptions into a forecast, right? So build the model, right? Let's see, right? Based on your market, how many people you're going to hire or have, or whatever the case may be, the size of the market you're in geographically, the data is out there. You can work out how many shoe shops there are in New South Wales and the ACT or even the Western suburbs, whatever the case may be. Right? That data is available. You just got to go find it, right? And if you know that there are 100 shoe shops in Western Sydney and there are 250,000 people, right? And they are on average buy 2 pairs of shoes a year, then there's probably an oversupply of shoe shops, right? So unless you get your competitive advantage or your differentiation strategy, right, which is obviously all thought out in that document, says that you are going to be incredibly different, right? And that you can capitalize on a certain niche of the shoe selling market, right? Then you probably need to rethink your strategy. But if you have all of those things, let's articulate those in a forecast, right? So let's plan out the next 2 to 3 years, right? Based on what you've learned from your strategy, right? Once you've done that, if the bottom line looks good, right? If you're putting in a decent amount of work, and I think the red flag here has got to be fair and reasonable with your assumptions. And that is really hard because all business owners definitely got those optimism glasses on. And we'll essentially just over-assume. It's that simple. And over-assuming by 10 or 15% is the difference between making money and not making money, because most businesses, as I've said a million times, I've read today, don't make money. And those that do make money, builders are happy to take home less than 10% on a net profit basis. I mean, services-based businesses obviously typically make a little bit more than that. But if you're at retail, right, and you make between say 8 and 12% net profit a year, right, and you're 10% out on the revenue side, right, because you've just been a little bit too optimistic, you're not making money. And that's how fine it is. So understand your strategy, build a forecast to make sure you got all your settings right. Once you've got your forecast set right, then you can move on to the systems and the processes, right? How are you actually going to deliver everything in your forecast and your strategy, right? So that is picking the right people, putting in the right places, right? Your org chart and things like that, choosing your technology stack for delivery, whatever industry you're in, right? If you're in building, right, then you'll need something, right, that captures all your quality, your invoicing, things like that, but then also probably manages materials and your other resource inputs, right? If you're in retail, you definitely have the same sort of thing, right? You've just got your stock manager, your payroll system that would plug into it, plus your financial system. Likewise with financial services. So once you've got all of that, right, and then you just pick the right people, right? And going back to the very start where I said the Bains and McKinseys do this for big corporations, they will do this end to end where they will then go out and hire the right people for the Procter and Gambles and your Cokes and things like that, right? Coke, I mean, when they hire a new CEO, they'll internally try and find someone, but they quite often will go speak to or engage, recruiters. I mean, they're obviously in a different niche when they're at that level of the market, but they'll engage people that fit in with the business strategy, right? Because having the wrong person leading the business that doesn't understand the strategy is a recipe for disaster. I mean, I love, I don't know if you've ever read Chip Wilson's book. He started Lululemon.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. I think they ultimately thought they got it right, got it wrong. And I mean, it's an interesting book, but maybe I won't get into it too much because you never know if it's just the founder having a tantrum effectively. But I mean, I got some of the points that Chip made around making sure that the strategy that he'd set from day one, and ultimately a lot of those values systems that were ingrained in the organization, that the new leadership, when they brought in by his own ambition, because he didn't have the skill sets to lead Lululemon at that level, at that size, right? That they needed to understand that, because that was still the core of who Lululemon was, right? So you think, okay, that's Lululemon, I don't need to know that kind of stuff. Well, you really do, right? Because as we've kind of said, small businesses make big businesses one day, right? And so you want to set these things today, right? You want to have good foundations, structures, processes, people to enable you to get to that level, to make sure that you make money every single year. I mean, let's just start there. Let's not even talk about being a Fortune 500 company or anything like that. Let's just talk about achieving your goal of being financially free, or having time away from your business to raise your family, but still being successful. Whatever your motivators are, let's just start there. You've got to do these things as a baseline, in my opinion.
And you put all that so eloquently. And I'm also keen to hear, you mentioned before we jumped on this recording what your mission was, and I'd love for you to share that with the listeners.
Look, my mission is to help people. And I realize that is such a cliche, but it comes from a really good place. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a small business owner, but I grew up in a small business family as well. I was really fortunate to grow up in that environment, but I also understand more than most the trials and tribulations of being a small business owner. So my mission is to with that awareness, with that knowledge, with my background and expertise and things like that, is to give people the tools that they need, right, to not be in that 40% of small SMEs or larger businesses for that matter, because their stats are only still slightly different once you get over that $10 million turnover, is to help them be profitable, right? Or to create the outcome that they're looking for. And that's really the answer. If it is to be hard profitable to get financial freedom, or if it is to be to have a really successful business so that they can have time away from their business, right, so structured for their lifestyle, then I'm here for that as well. I would really love for people in my space to have a more structured and long-term role with businesses. I don't see myself really as an advisor in a chime in to help with a project, chime out kind of way. with what I do, it's really a partnership, right? The more that I can ingrain myself in the workings of the business, not to make it reliant on me in any way, shape, or form, right? That's the last thing I want to do. And I'm sure as a coach, right, um, you want to enable people, right, to be their own coaches in the future, right? You want to make yourself redundant is the point that I'm trying to make. So I like to view it as a partnership so I can bestow the tools, right? So they can be a successful business, right? But ultimately so I can create those outcomes. So at some point in the future, whether it be 10 or 15 years down the track, that every business has is working with a bravura, for instance, that is helping them create those outcomes. Because I think it's also only going to get more complex from here. I think the number of businesses in Australia is only going to grow, or the globe is only going to grow. And with trends like we're seeing at the moment, as we already spoke about in younger generations, where they want that freedom and want to take on the big wide world kind of thing. We're going to see more of that. It's going to get more complex, more challenging, more competitive. So to set yourself apart, you're going to need some help.
Definitely. And as I've mentioned in previous episodes, when speaking with the guests, the number one piece of advice a lot of them give is get a mentor or get support. It's not expected that we know how to do all this by ourselves. We're not born out of the womb having really in-depth business knowledge or financial knowledge. It's not that expectation. It's having that awareness to what you mentioned before and going, cool, I'm aware of this now. What sort of support do I need? And having the courage and the proactivity to go after that support. And so I would also love to hear, is there anything we haven't touched on today that you think is super important for someone who is a small business potentially in those first 3 years and looking to transition into a fully fledged big business? Is there anything that you think they need to know that we haven't spoken to today?
Action. I mean, taking action is again cliched now, and feel like a bit of an idiot for saying it, but it is so true. And even if taking action is hiring someone to do it all for you, that is still action, right? So don't feel that if you're still overwhelmed by the fact that, okay, if I go get a coach, they're just going to make me do more stuff, and that makes you go more inside your shell, right? That is, there are done for you services in every single way out there, right? So that's probably the last bit of help or bit that I can leave with people, because nothing works unless you do. And again, that's the lines are just coming out thinking fast at this point. Nothing works unless you do. So just putting the effort, it's there. Knowing that, maybe I'll leave with this, even though that 43% of businesses don't make, small businesses don't make money, whatever the number is, right? That means that, and it's not a negative, I'm trying to put a positive spin on this, right? That leaves a lot of opportunity for you. If you want to take your step outside of that 43%, right? It's almost getting to the point where it'll be less competitive there, right? If you can get everything set, all your structured systems, right? To be a profitable business, the market is there for the taking.
100%. And I'm a sucker for a quote, so keep stats and quotes coming. And you've given a really simple process that people can follow. And like we said, it's just not easy. It's simple to do. There's a way it can all work out. It's not easy and you need to be willing to do the work. So I love the thought of taking action too, to add to your quotes list. It's dreams are just dreams unless you take action and bring them into reality. And so I'd love to hear on the action front, what's something really actionable that someone can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to support that transition from small business to fully fledged business looking to scale into big business?
I think, so the first step is a mental step, right? Is to start thinking like a real bona fide business operator. That's got to be step one. And then step two is to speak to someone about it. The external accountability bit, even if you want to reach out to me or people like yourself, right? That has got to be the first step, because they'll start, once you've taken that next step, the momentum is also shared in a way, right? They'll push you, you keep pushing yourself. And I think that's the only way that, and I mean, even if it ends up being a bit of a false start, once you've made that first step once, the next time you make it, it's less of a big leap. So if I can lead people with that, do those two things, and we'll see where it goes.
Perfect. And if someone's like, oh, for step two, I want to talk to you, Gerard, where can they find you?
Look, bravuraadvisory.com.au is the easiest way to do it. I'm also on most of the socials and things like that. Or, speak to Myth, speak to yourself. So you can send you my way. I also hang out a lot at Burley Strength on weeknights in the evenings. So I work while I train. If you want to do that, I'm always up for a reason to procrastinate between sets. So
Love it. Awesome. I'll put all those details in the show notes. But thank you so much, Gerard, for your time today. Really, really appreciate it.
no, likewise. Thanks for the opportunity to spend.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I so enjoy having you here, and I hope you've taken away powerful insights and tools that will support you to achieve your high-level results. Now, before you go apply all of this wisdom in your life, I would be so grateful if you are able to leave us a podcast review on the platform that you're listening to, or share this episode with a friend. Your support means that we can help more self-led, high-performing individuals just like you expand what's possible for them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so please go on and shoot me a note on socials and let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at MiffGalloway. Now, go ahead and make those dreams a reality, because actually, you can.